Hello and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is a podcast about the fine art of designing miniature games, which we endeavor to do better every day through study, studious study, and studious study. I have been designing a miniatures game recently, and it comes to my attention that I have not been able to play test it as much as I would like to. And the reason is that, as we have discussed at length in other places on a previous video, one really important way of playtesting your game is to playtest it by yourself. Solo playtesting, absolutely critical. Glenn, on our earlier video on playtesting, was emphatic that you must solo playtest before you bring a game before another human, because it is going to collapse in front of you, and it may as well do that when you're not wasting your friend's precious time. Um, I don't mind playtesting games by myself. I do it a lot. In fact, I sometimes video it and put it on my Planet Smasher Games YouTube channel. But there comes a time when I am trying to focus on the development of the rules, and I can't really be asked to think about what the other guy's doing. And I perhaps play the game poorly, and therefore I'm not really playtesting it to the fullest sort of extent of what might be going on. Or, as what's been happening with Pacific Command recently, the game is stuffed with sort of misinformation and hidden information and decision making that is just really difficult to play both sides of. And I don't know how board game designers do this with, hands of card games or whatever. But what I came to first with Hobgoblin and then most recently with Pacific Command is writing a solo mode for the purposes of testing. So my question to you, gentle listener, is should you write a solo mode for your game simply so that you can play test it?
Well, since I was listening to that, I'll take myself as the gentle listener, and give an opinion. I'd say what I found that might be relatively interesting is, like,
Hmm.
for example, Gaslands I found incredibly easy to solo playtest.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I think that I found that is that Gaslands had quite clearly defined sponsors who want to do certain things. Because of the way that the vote sort of generation system works in Gaslands, the sponsors like want you to behave a certain way. It's
Hmm.
almost like it's clearly not an AI system, but it's a little thing that tells you like what perspective. Okay, this is a roundabout analogy, but my
Bring it on.
my toddler has recently gotten a relatively complicated jigsaw puzzle, and he likes it being put together, and he knows where all the pieces go, but he hasn't quite mastered dropping the pieces in to fit because they're quite thick, and you need to actually go from above and line it up and then drop it down rather than
Hmm.
just shoving it sort of into place. And so what he does is picks up a piece, brings it over to me, hands it to me, and then points at the exact spot that he wants the piece to go in. And then I do the donkey work of slotting it in. And with Gaslands, the sponsors were like pointing at a thing for me to do, and then I went through the donkey work of picking a template and like assigning the dice and doing all that sort of stuff. And so I was doing this very sort of rudimentary thing, but not making like decisions about what I should be doing at this moment and what should be driving this particular character, because it's like, well, I know full well what Idris wants to do. He wants to find a nice clear run on a straight and be in sixth gear, and so that's what I will try to do for him.
Hmm.
um Whereas conversely, like, through to Playlandia, which I'm working on at the moment, it's meant to have like hidden information, and B,
Hmm.
everyone has basically all the same abilities and stats and goals. So it's having to play. And like for where I've been doing boards and black flags, it has these hidden like cups of dice where you want to claim what dice you chose, and the other person has to decide whether or not you're lying or not. And once or twice, playtesting that on my own, I'm going, okay, I'm going to claim that that's a three. Do I think I would know whether he was? and then you're going like, okay, well, like they're going to try to go like, well, objectively, how important is this role? Objectively, how many resources has he used? Therefore, like objectively, how likely would the average person be to call him on it? Do you,
And here we are at the point where potentially knowing all of those things, you could mechanize that. And
potentially,
if you could mechanize it, because that would accelerate your own process and you wouldn't have to worry it every time you just flip a card or roll a dice or something, then, aren't you at the beginnings of, that extremely valuable solo mode that everyone wants in their games?
I would see, and well, this is the other thing. My other opinion is that solo modes that are a list of instructions that you would follow whilst playing the game against yourself in this manner tend to be bad solo modes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my experience, the good solo modes are the things that I've heard referred to, and I refer to myself as the automata system.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do is you figure out the space that another player will take within the game, and then you have the game just sit its fat game ass in that space and get in the way and do things and poop stuff out for you.
Which
Um,
is, which is, I think, to a degree, significantly easier in a sort of laddering style board game with resource contention than it is in a zeroing out, blow you each other up war game.
Potentially, although there is an option to be like, okay, well, what another player will do is accumulate victory points at roughly this sort of late rate, and cause attrition to your forces at this sort of rate. So we'll
Right,
just
but if that attrition is to do with the relative positions, and the only thing you have to do is shoot people, and there's no one there to shoot, then
no, I agree. I think you're right, but I think fundamentally it's like a series of instructions. When I'm soloing a game to myself, I need to go through every single step
mm,
because I need to know whether something weird happens when you actually do that step, and whether you look at where the pieces are and you think about it, and then you have to move the tokens around. You go, oh crap, this token is over here now. It should be over there, or that guy can just see this thing happening, or
yeah.
that guy can just turn that thing off. Whereas when you are asking a player to enjoy themselves soloing a game, basically a set of instructions that are like, go through every piece of rigmarole, but don't engage your brain at any point or actually think about it or make any actual decisions. It's not a fun thing to do, to my mind. What I want when a game is soloing for me is for it to be sort of as abstracted down. And I think
Hmm.
fundamentally, one of the things that's really difficult about doing a solo mode for minis games is that by and large they are two-player games.
Mm.
And often what you get in board games, we get an automata. It's like a 3, 4, 5-player game, and it fills out the third spots. You can play two-player. And a lot of the time, when you do a game with an actual solo mode, you let the game cheat. The game
Yeah.
cheats. It just has special abilities because that makes things more interesting. Whereas having a two-player game, which is very much based on like how smart the other person is and the plans they can come up with and the ways they can outwit you, and then writing down a set of instructions that the human player can just read and just know exactly what's coming in order to pilot the other side of that tight thing of two players locked in sort of mental struggle. I very rarely find it satisfying,
Mm.
interesting. I always think it's a quite sort of pale reflection on what the game should be, and so it's like,
So returning to playtesting then. So like if the other side, if this set of instructions is boring and unsatisfying, but is essentially removing mental load from you as the playtester, and crucially is not completely abstracting the opponent. It might be abstracting some parts of it because you need to let them cheat because they don't have intelligence. But like critically, when I'm approaching this sort of a problem space, one of my rules is it must allow me to play normally. I have to be playing through the normal rules because otherwise, what the hell am I even testing here? but it's possible that the other person is playing through some of the rules normally and occasionally is just allowed to cheat. So, for example, in Pacific Command, I don't know if this is going to work yet because I've only been writing it this afternoon, but we talked in the last video about the fact that I'm creating a system where you've got a couple of playing cards for each task force, and those playing cards sort of say what you're going to, what sort of stance you're going to take, whether you're going aggressive or defensive. And that gave me the idea, well, actually, I could just get you to deal out a bunch of pairs of cards for every stack, that every pile of poker chips that the robot player has, and then we can turn those things over to find out, okay, it's one of the four actions. You know, are they essentially going after the victory points? Are they going after a base? Are they going after a task force? And so, like, you can there, I can build a sort of unpredictable, cheaty AI that forces me to react. It doesn't necessarily play the game well, and it probably won't beat me, but at least forces me to react, which triggers the systems in the game that I'm trying to play test. And it's probably not going to be something that I will be able to get to the point where a game basically based on hidden information and social interaction has a satisfying solo mode. That seems kind of insane, but it at least will allow me to say, okay, I'm kind of tired. It's the end of the day, but I've made a load of changes. I need to test these changes. Robot, go. Let's like make game happen.
Yeah, I think if the question you're asking here is, as a game designer, is it a good idea to make a handful of notes about how you play player two? I think that is sensible, and I think for me, I think it's sensible because what I don't want to do is like mess up the control. Player two is like my control player. I
Right. Yeah,
want
yeah, yeah.
I want him to sort of play the same kind of way every way. So if I'm playing a certain faction, I want to know what that faction can do. I want that to be the faction that I like try and do mad stuff with and push risks and try and like do odd things. And if
Right.
I'm
Whereas
doing
your AI opponent plays the meat and potato faction and does meat and potato actions, and
Yeah, because it's like if I do that with both factions and I happen to get crazy lucky with one of them, and so it absolutely kicks off and goes mad and is like hyper powered, I don't really know what the faction I was testing actually plays like because I've just played it into like a million sixes and it's just like been obliterated.
can I admit something to you? I don't know if you do this as well. When I'm playing myself in a playtesting situation, I will quite often make the same attack roll like 4 times just to have a look. And it's not because I'm cheating, because I want to know, look, because I'm waiting for the good roll. It's because I want to sort of see what, like, I've spent quite a lot of time engineering a situation. I can't be asked to re-engineer that situation 10 times, but I will like make the roll sort of 3 or 4 times in order to sort of feel different results and see whether certain results feel more irritating or unfair given all the resources or the situation. Do you ever do that, or are you absolutely like the dice decide?
Well, I think when I do like playtest solo playtesting of a game, it's because I want to know like what the overall sort of shape of the game is going to end up being. If I'm playtesting like one moment, I'll just set that moment up,
Yeah, yeah,
and just go through it. If it's like a whole game where I'm playing both sides, I want to see the whole game and then the end of it and go like, oh yeah, that like pivoted really nicely at the end there, and it
yeah.
all like we went mad, and there was a moment where I totally thought that this side was screwed, and then they like came back again. So no, I don't. I wouldn't do that for a single role in a full game play test. I feel like that would just like I would rather see those moments go by and like just fall flat because the dice didn't do it, and learn that
And
that's
then reflect on that. Yeah.
and whether it's like okay, but it's fine because there were like five of those moments in the game and one of them came off, so I don't have to worry about it.
I
Or
think for me, there's something about knowing the probability and feeling the probability, which are different, which is like, I can know what a dice pool is going to produce as a spread. And then, you know, when it happens to me, or the result comes up, and it's just like, yeah, you get an emotional connection with that moment that isn't available.
no, I know what you mean, and I think that, and this is I think because it's emotional connection, it's a personal thing. Is like for me, it's more valuable to be disappointed by that moment going past
Mm.
several times and then go, right, crap, I'm taking I'm
Right,
taking
right,
the
right,
dice
right.
roll out of that, because like it went by 3 or 4 times. I was upset every single time. It does keeps not happening.
Yeah.
Balls to it, it's happening. It happens when you put on the funny hat, the fireworks go off. I'll just have it happen. Whereas it's like, is it tasty and valuable that it kept disappointing me? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and I'd rather feel the bitter disappointment, to know. But yeah, I think if you're doing solo playtesting, I think, and I do like make a few notes about
Mm,
generally how player two like defaults, and which sort of direction they go in and how they tend to play. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, today player two is playing really aggro, and I'll sort of try and like get him up front rather than playing defensive,
mm.
or like I'll try and have him swarm a single point and see what happens, and then just mindlessly have him swarm it and try and react to it intelligently. Whereas if the question is that are those kinds of instructions that you've put in so that you don't have to engage particularly closely with the play experience, a good idea to offer players with your game? My argument would be anything that includes the phrase so that you don't have to properly engage with the game is not something to offer to the
Yeah,
player.
sure, but it's so you don't have to engage with the game twice from two ends.
Well, yeah, but I feel like at that point, as I say, for me, I want to try to make solo modes more sort of more unique experiences.
Mm,
And I've done this myself. I've got a deck building game which has like an AI, which is a set of instructions you can follow that will literally play out like a little human being for you. And and one of the issues with that is it's okay. The game ends up being okay at playing itself. It's an all right opponent. It's not.
mm,
No one's going to have a great game with that. It's a really good way to learn the game.
mm.
But if you actually want to play it solo, there's also a score attack mode in that same game. The attack mode is like 3 lines. It was much easier to write, and it's a much better way of playing the game solo.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. It's like minis games are so hard to do like solo modes for. It's like we talked before on the channel about Gaslands, and it's like Gaslands feels like it should be the easiest thing in the world to do a solo mode for, because time attack is a real thing that exists in life.
Yeah.
People try and go like rally tracks who are all about racing solo. Nobody races.
Right. And they absolutely require a microscopic variation that a templates game doesn't provide.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's
Like, like for all its non-discreteness, like Gaslands, you can measure out exactly what the optimum path is using exact templates, and like that's how many you're gonna, like, do you get the dice rolls to do that or not? Like, how interesting is that for 45 minutes play?
no, yeah, absolutely. It's like, yeah, I know why the solo mode in Gaslands doesn't
Yeah,
work, although it
yeah,
feels
yeah.
like it absolutely, definitely should. And it's
Right, but like I've played more solo Gaslands than anything else because Gaslands is just fine crashing cars into each other. Like,
no, and this is the thing about, yeah, again, this is the thing about writing that kind of solo mode is to my mind, and then offering it to a player is that
mm,
I think that if you're the sort of player who wants to line up two full armies and like fight them against each other, you're fine with just taking the other like player's point of view, just walking
yeah,
around the table and going, well, I'll put on my other general's hat now. I'm fine with this. And I personally don't think, I might be wrong. I don't think those kinds of players on any level want to make it easier for them when they're playing player two. I think that when
mm,
you're I think that when you're playing solo and you don't want to just walk around the table and take the other part of the other player, what you're looking for is like a challenge to engage with as a solo player, and something to like sort of push your brain against. And those sets of AI instructions, I have never in my life come across one that gave you that. And I've come
mm,
across loads of like automata or automata like systems that really do give you that in what would normally be a two-player game. And
yeah,
so it's like, it ends up being it's a tricky thing to write. It's hard for players to engage with. it doesn't give you as much as just ignoring it and playing it two player for a certain sort of player, and it doesn't satisfy the other sort of player. So it's like, I don't know why I would offer that to somebody, and like I say, for me as a designer, solo testing, yeah, I want to have notes to go like, okay, well, what you do in this situation is you tend to go for like the middle objective. Remember that, so that
Yeah.
next time you don't do something mad and throw off all of your testing. But to like write that list of instructions and offer it to a player as a solo mode option, personally, I don't think I would do that. And there might be a game where it really really worked for, but as a
Mhm.
rule, I don't think I would tend to do that. I don't necessarily like think that it's sort of giving out reward. I mean, is that is that something you're planning on doing? Is that what you're working towards?
Well, I mean,
Not
because
now, not now. You said that.
well, no. So I've got a somewhat automated opponent in Hobgoblin,
Mm,
which basically it follows some short instructions. So it's much more of the automated opponent school of things. And in A Billion Suns, I've got very much an automaton, sorry, where because it's an economic game, like I can fill up the economic space and I can put like essentially what is, you know, defense lasers sort of spawned in. And so that just puts pressure on the things that you care about, like where's your money draining away and where are your ships getting attacked. But in Pacific Command, I'm sort of I'm at the place right now where what I need is an automated opponent because it needs to it needs to do things because it needs to do things as if it knew where its chips were when I don't know where its chips are. And
mm.
that is a particular kind of problem that I've got where I need to solve that with a sort of an algorithm, a playtesting algorithm. So I don't know whether that playtesting algorithm will end up being interesting enough. But I guess the other difference is um, because I tend to like pushing things around. Like there's a part of Mike which is very much like pull levers, levers are fun, yay levers. And so I've released solo modes. So the solo mode for A Billion Suns, like it definitely works better for some players than others because some players come to it and go, this isn't quite hard enough, or it's not quite doing some of the things that I would like. Whereas some other people are like, well, this is great that I have a way to play this game and pull levers and levers are fun.
But then I think the thing with A Billion Suns is it's inherently this sort of PvPvE game anyway, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
game very much about telling these epic stories of getting through and rescuing the scientist, etc., etc. Um, and so like you could basically play A Billion Suns solo anyway, even just as it is, like or just telling the story of it. It won't be challenging, but it don't totally generate that sort of
yeah.
narrative experience on your own. Whereas I think that like Pacific Command is right down the other end of the scale of like A Billion Suns. I think I could play. I could play. I know I could play solo either way. Pacific Command, the concept of playing it solo is mad. It
It
just is
doesn't make any
inherently
sense.
deranged. It's like I'm going to play Skull solo. It's like, oh yes, I found the rose. Who knew that was brilliant? Well, I good.
Yeah, no, that's a good analog.
And it's like, yeah, it's sort of, and like I say, I've had a little nudge of like what it must be like playing Pacific Command solo, doing Borders and Black Flags solo, because I've got to like pretend that I don't know what's under the lying dice cup, but
Mm,
like that's all of Pacific Command. It's just
exactly.
lying dice cups on the
Exactly.
table. And so
And again, it goes back to this fact that like I need the brain space for considering rules and analyzing systems and weighing up different design options. Like I don't need I can't use space for managing a second opponent on that level, which is why I wrote it for Hobgoblin as well. Like Hobgoblin takes the hassle out of having an opponent because the opponent just behaves not predictably, but systematically, and so yeah. So the answer to the question is I would and have written them in that way. I don't think they're anywhere near as satisfying. I agree with you that the more satisfying way is to have the game sitting abstractly in the places that you wish it wasn't sat. It's a more it's a much lower energy, lower admin way of essentially driving decision making, but it doesn't work in every case, and particularly it's difficult for miniatures games.
And I'd tell you, the thing about Hobgoblin, I just say is, I think that a Hobgoblin is one of those games that can be played perfectly well by the opponent as a brawler rather than like a fencer. If you've got the right army, you can just roll up and bludgeon into somebody, and that'll be a pretty solid challenge to deal with. And so
Yeah,
the fact that you can have an AI that goes, sort of have this list and have it just roll up and just try and steamroll you off the table is like, there's plenty of human opponents who will write that list and use that list. So that's fair.
yeah,
It's not like, writing some complicated, because there are plenty of lists that are like, oh, it's this all flying list, and what it needs to do is go behind you and turn around and get you in the flank. It's like, well, don't write that list for your AI opponent
yeah.
in Goblin. Write the one that's like bunch of heavy infantry with elite that go ram, 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 and have you like deal with that. And I think so. I do think it does depend on the game, and it's like, whereas I can't even begin to imagine how complex an AI system for like Malifaux would end up being. That would just be like the worst thing to sort of experience.
Yeah.
And that's like because of the mechanical nature of the game. Whereas again, Pacific Command, it's like, I do not know what the solo mode for that really looks like that is still playing Pacific Command.
So, fun story. The reason Perilous Tales exists is because I tried to write a solo mode for Malifaux.
Hmm.
So I took some of the Malifaux models and I said, well, these like I had the big frog mother and the little froglets that go with her and some eggs. And I built a sort of like she goes nuts if you nick the eggs, but you have to nick the eggs sort of scenario. And that's what turned into Perilous Tales,
And
oddly.
and I think that's one of the big things for like for skirmish games. I'd far rather you just wrote a solo scenario,
Yeah.
that says you've got to go into this weird thing and pick up the gem of boulder releasing, and when you pick it up, a boulder rolls out and tries to squash you. You know, and for like for,
Where the yes, and essentially the scenario provides the abstract opponent in the form of a clock and something difficult that you have to do, and obstructions in the way of that difficult thing being done.
yeah, and I think particularly for like for skirmish games, for single model games, that automata mode is a solo scenario that
Mm.
says you need to go here and you need to get there within a certain amount of time, and here's some difficult terrain around it, and then you need to do a thing, and then something starts hurting you once you've done the thing, and it'll cause you this amount of pain, and then you've got to get off again within X amount of time, because that's basically the things that a human opponent does to you in one of those games. It's way hard, like a rank and flank. I don't think you can really do that version of a
You've
solo
not got anything
scenario,
like the same flexibility to do it.
but
Yeah.
you can give people certain lists that like, if you the Warhammer Fantasy Battle like version is like an all frenzied corn demon list, which also plays anyway.
Exactly.
You don't have to make any choices that even when you are a human being.
Unless
It's
you walk it backwards towards the opponent.
unless you turn around, fly, turn around, fly, turn around.
Anyway, once we're on Warhammer tournament lists, we've probably concluded our discussion on the topic. So the question at hand was: should you write a solo mode to playtest your game? And then we explored, does that solo mode therefore mean that you've written a solo mode for your players? And I think we've concluded they are quite probably very different things, and you'd approach them with different mindsets. Useful, thank you.
Okay, I'm glad that was handy. If you found that useful, drop down to the comment section. One thing I will say about writing solo modes is that it's a nice way to sort of take some early steps of game designing. If you've got a game that you really enjoy and you don't have a regular opponent, writing a solo mode that is something more sort of extravagant than like a set of flowcharts and step by steps that you enjoy playing through and going against will teach you a lot about how it feels for other people to be like playing through your rules and
Yeah, right. Like
appreciating.
like an Infinity scenario with sentry guns, or like a Malifaux thing with stuff you got to steal out from underneath guards or whatever.
Absolutely. If you have like tried writing your own solo mode, if you haven't, have a quick go at it with a game that you enjoy, and then tell us about it in the comments section. If you already have, just tell us straight about it in the comments section. Swing down to that comments section, and as you're passing on your way to where the comments are, there's a couple of buttons. One is like, and one is subscribe. Press them both on the way down.
YouTube likes it when you do that.
And then swing back up again to the bit just down here, but above the comments section, where there's a set of links, one of which is to our Discord, where you can swing by, where I know that there are people who are like working through flowchart systems and solo games, for solo-led games. I think it's a very different thing, which we have spoken about before on the channel, and talk to them about designing solo modes. And then swing by onto Mike's Patreon and help him to design more solo modes for more games, his past games, his future games, by supporting his Patreon and supporting the channel and being a generally lovely, lovely, lovely person. But for now, from this episode of Rule of Carnage, I think it will be a thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye, wherever you are. Bye.
Bye bye.